Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's now noon Central Standard Time, so we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Very excited to have our two speakers on here today, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. I am Lisa Baining. I'm one of your account managers at Red Caffeine, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Business as Unusual, featuring Phil Sponslor of Orbitform. As a few housekeeping things, we do have everyone on mute this morning. So if you do need to ask a question, please go to the bottom of your screen. Scrolling over the bottom, we'll have a menu bar appear and use the Q&A option. Feel free to ask your questions throughout the presentation today, and we'll have time at the end where Phil will go ahead and answer those for you. So feel free to reach out that way. You can also go over to the More option and use the chat function if you'd like to speak with me privately. Thank you to everyone who registered for today's session. Our first 5 registrants were very excited to be getting lunch as part of our outreach to the hospitality and the restaurant industry, which have been hit so hard during the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to give a shout out today to our restaurants. So we have orders from Schmaltz Deli in Naperville, Illinois, Doreen's Pizza from Dyer, Indiana, The Stadium in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, Jimmy Ty from Deerfield, Illinois, and then rounding out with Clavin's in Jackson, Michigan, which I know is near and dear to Phil's heart, and Star Thai and Sushi in Siesta Key, Florida, which is where Kathy is at. So really unique. We look forward to continuing to support our restaurant industry in our upcoming webinars, so stay tuned for more info on those. With that, I'd like to go ahead and send things over to Kathy Steele, the founder and principal of Red Caffeine, to get our webinar started. So Kathy, continue on.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. Well, I am Kathy Steele, and I am the president of Red Caffeine, and Red Caffeine builds growth plans for really cool, badass businesses. And we are so fortunate to have Phil Sponslor, a good friend and a client, and I just absolutely adore Phil. And I want to tell a quick story about how famous Phil really is. That I was doing a speaking engagement in Dallas, Texas at the Gathering of the Games. And as I was wrapping up, people were standing in line to talk with me, and a gentleman stood in front of me and said, "I have 2 words for you." And I thought they were going to be like, "Great job" or "Great content." And they were Phil Sponslor. And so he said, "I saw your sticker, your Orbitform sticker on your laptop computer, and I just love Phil." And so we're really excited to have Phil on today. So Phil, tell us a little bit more about yourself and Orbitform.
Well, president of Orbitform. I've been there since 2000, working for Mike Shirkey, our owner. And, we've been in business since 1984, and we provide forming, fastening, riveting, and automation equipment for people that assemble stuff, parts. We're fully integrated, so all our major processes are underneath our roof in Jackson, Michigan. We have 115 really awesome employees. We've worked really hard to create a competent servant leadership structure at Orbitform based on Mark Dietering's Leading Jesus' Way. And, that's been pretty pinnacle for us, as it's created a consistent culture, and we've invested in the culture. And man, during this time right now, we're really leaning heavy on our culture because, and the employees of Orbitform to help us get through this time.
Yeah, well, you do have some great employees. So I love working with them as well. And so, we want to kind of jump in and talk about how has it been going? How has the pandemic of COVID-19 positively or negatively impacted your business at Orbitform?
Wow, well, I think you have to look at it as in light of the offensive things that you can do and the defensive things that you can do in this situation. For us, we've chosen to go on the offense, but on the defensive side, you can do the normal things of watching your operating expense, maybe putting off some purchases and things that might not be needed at this time. But on the on the offensive side, our sales organization, which is pretty pretty intense, and I can talk at length about that. But we outbound quite a bit, and we've tripled our efforts on our outbound. That's the type of thing that is just been huge for us. I'd like to say that, I hear of other companies and they talk about, not knowing what to do. We're getting 10, on average, 10 web meetings or phone conferences each day that are related around either getting people familiar with Orbitform or that there's an actual application. And there are still applications out there to be found. After this gets over, there's going to be those things that people figure out that they have to do, especially with the big effort that is associated with the reshoring that's going on right now. So
yeah. And I mean, you do really, I know it was sort of, I don't know if it was foresight or thinking a little bit about the recession, but I know you guys also have invested in your spare parts and tooling revenue stream this year. And I think that was a pretty interesting bet to put money on. And I think, we're going to see some real opportunity of growth.
That is such a great, it's the trying to crack the secret code associated with it. It's spare parts and tooling. You really get a call or something, and we have a very healthy spare parts and tooling business that's associated with all the systems and stuff. If we've been in business since '84, and some of the products that we bought and brought into the business go back into the 20s type stuff. So you really don't buy stuff until you absolutely need it. But just like if you buy a car, you don't buy 4 new tires, when you buy the car, just in case, or when those are going to wear out. So it's just getting the message out there and really being intentional about the messaging associated with it. And it's hard work. It's been some heavy lifting to hit the right tone in that messaging that has people that have our equipment or our competitors' equipment that they think of us.
Right. And I think diversification is going to be a key aspect of thinking differently about business as we move through, this next few months into even 2021. So I'm going to step back to positivity, because I know you guys have just done something sort of unique around good things. So can you speak a little bit about how you guys are scorecarding positivity at Orbitform?
Yeah, we actually are taking a look at, Jake Sponslor is keeping a running list of things that are positive that are coming out of this. And that is, that's kind of interesting when you think about it, that, you sit there and you say, in this situation, to pull yourself away from the fear and the, being worried and stuff like that, and saying, how do we get ourselves into a positive mindset? And we have over 24, 26 bona fide things that we've improved in the business. The mega ones are, in 48 hours, we had 0 people that were working from remotely to we had 50 people working remotely. Numerous paperless systems have been created. We've been pretty much a paperless system, but we realized that we still relied on paper moving amongst everybody. Bam. We just put in place probably 5 or 6 paperless systems that are more effective. You have an ability to trap information so that if it's not filled in right or whatever. So a lot of variability has been removed from our process. Our sales team tripling their outbound efforts. We created the reshoring initiative, and I can talk at length about that because I think that it's one of the most spirited, American spirited innovation that's happening right now that's associated with that. Our rapid product development of the UVC decontamination chamber. In 5 days, we had, it all started with our owner, Mike Shirkey, saying, we got to figure out a way to help. And, that was his first statement. And, in the N95 mask and people having to reuse, dirty and soiled mask, he says, why can't we create, using UV, why can't we create a way to decontaminate or greatly enhance the reusability? And so, Jake Sponsler, designed over the weekend the concept sketch that Mike had given him. On that Monday morning, that was on a Saturday morning. On a Monday morning, Jim Smith was programming our laser cutter to cut out the panels to create the chamber. We were putting, Mark Shirkey created the supply line for the UV lights and the componentry that goes along with that. So our materials group jumped into the fray. And it was a really rallying process. Orbitform was working, for our normal customer base, a lot of medical companies that we supply. And so we were there working, but it was just a total rallying cry. And so within 6 days, we created the version 1, did some testing, all that sort of stuff. And then 5 days later, we created version 2 that you're looking at on the screen right now. That's a smaller, more compact unit that is proving to be better than version 1. So we're actually working on a version 3 that's going to be more manufacturable. So we're having a lot of interest, that's associated with this product. Primarily from smaller, we have 3 major health systems that are looking at it, but smaller users like police departments, fire departments, nursing homes, where they're kind of down the list on getting the PPE type stuff. And so they've got to have some way to be able to, stretch that material further than what they have in the past. One really good thing about this unit is that you get to stay in control of your mask. So it can be right on the unit floor, or it can be right in your building, and you can put your initial on your mask goes in, your mask comes out, you get back your mask. Control the chain of handling for your own personal mask. And I know that's a big thing for a lot of people. And I just think about myself, would I want to get back something that, Billy Bob down the street was using?
Right.
I don't think so.
Right. So, well, I want to emphasize why you can do that, though. I think that it's really, whether we're reshoring and thinking about our collaborative manufacturing community in the United States and our ability to extend each other's services, you guys actually can ideate, you can prototype, you can build, you can, get it out the door. I mean, you've done a lot to, reshore, inshore your own manufacturing capabilities, fabrication capabilities. I mean, you've just got it all under the one roof. So I think that's how we're all going to need to be thinking as manufacturers today around how can we do things within our own organization or extend into our manufacturing community. So I think it's pretty cool how, you wouldn't be able to do it if you were missing one of those components of the
right.
cycle.
I think it would be really hard. The major units was associated with this was our ability to fabricate the chamber, to have the electrical controls engineering in-house, and the mechanical engineering capabilities in-house, and then also a strong purchasing group that's here. So we more often than not have been environment where lead time and being able to get something done fast we really the owner of the business Mike Shirky has made some huge investments for us to be able to do that on site. So it's been a strategy. It's been a strategy that's been in place since probably 2004, 2005. And, decisions that we made 6 and 9 and 10 years ago on certain aspects of our business have come into play to be able to do this in a 6 and a 5 day turnaround process. So
yeah, it's amazing, really amazing. So I'm going to circle back to something you kind of started to talk a bit about, and we've both been through recessions before, and we've been referencing a Harvard Business Review article that talks about certain companies that not only survived recessions, but they've actually thrived, and they've kind of used some offensive and defensive strategies. Offensive is reducing costs, labor, reducing efficiency or increasing efficiencies and optimizing, and then other initiatives towards developing new markets, like your medical, advancements, and or investing in new assets, or both. So, can you talk a little bit about how you guys have approached those types of strategic moves in a little bit more detail than you did a little earlier?
Sure. I'm going to probably focus more on the offensive. It's easy to say that there's, we aren't, we don't have it in our strategy to lay people off. We've invested way too much money and way too much time and effort into the people that are at Orbitform. They're like family. And I know a lot of companies are like that, and that sort of stuff, but it's it really is, and that's the one thing I'd say is what's the offensive side of it is that you really have to, for all business leaders that are out there that are listening to this, they have to recognize that how they act and how they behave and the actions that they have coming out or during this process either strengthens or weakens the team. You either strengthen and live by your purpose and your values and show that on a regular basis, even when the decisions are extremely tough, and that they're not tough to know what to do, because your purpose and your values should be leading you. But being consistent and living to your purpose and values are huge. I think that people that don't do that or whatever, you need to be asking yourself, and washing your decisions across that. I think employees that are working at places where leaders aren't living their purpose, their stated purpose, and their values, that after this all gets over, that is going to be remembered. And that's the type of thing that is going to have people searching out companies that do live by their purpose and values. But here's the thing that I worry about, or that I see, is that a lot of companies are going to try to do this on the backs of their employees' payroll. And they're going to look at sales and say, well, sales can't go out and, travel and meet customers and stuff like that. I don't need so many people in sales right now. It's the worst thing you could absolutely do. You need to buy Jeb Blunt's book, Fanatical Prospecting. You need to tear that book apart chapter by chapter and invoke those tenets that are in that. And if you have, I firmly believe that if we could have 115 people fanatically prospecting for Orbitform if we needed to. So, it's the type of thing where, if you're going to a day lost in prospecting, is you lose a week lost in prospecting, you lose a month for your pipeline being filled. And so this is the time to double, triple down on your sales and marketing efforts. On the offense, the creation of the medical decontamination chamber was huge. Tacking the aerospace industry by joining the Aerospace Industry Association of Michigan is getting us into a whole different, we've done aerospace projects before, but we're not really tied into the supply line like we should be. And so we're working hard to figure that out. I've talked about our tripling our outbounding efforts. Also something that probably is a little strange, but we have something called the intentional career growth spidergraph process at Orbitform, and we have people right now that are working on that to enhance their careers, their skills and abilities in a pretty, systematic manner. And so we're getting some feedback that people are that are working on that. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I love your spider graph philosophy. It's really, really something. I know you're going to share out your contact information. If anybody is looking at how to create some professional development, they should tap you for sharing some of that thinking and what you guys have done. It's fascinating and really, really cool. And I couldn't agree with you more about culture. And we've talked about that. It is a lot of money. It gets invested in culture and building culture. But this is the time that those types of investments pay dividends. And so it is tough to quantify it sometimes, but I think we're going to have some outcomes over this next 6 months that are going to really quantify the investment in culture. So we've talked about some of the things that have been going extremely well. Why don't you tell us, what is your biggest challenge right now? Seems like sales is doing okay, and operations and financing. Like, what is challenging you?
You prepped me on that question, and I got to tell you that it took some real thinking to go through that and actually say, okay, so what should we be fearful of? And I wrote myself some notes. So the idea is I think across the sales, operations, finance, staffing, I think we're going to be okay in a large part. I think the biggest thing we fear and the biggest thing that we don't know is if there's a large recession or a big depression. And that just creates a whole lot of unknowns, of course, down to what level that all goes and that sort of stuff. So we're doing things right now to brace ourselves for the unknown. The creation of the Orbitform decontamination chamber was born out of a true, genuine desire to help. You couldn't help but look, every time you got on the national news and they were talking about PPE shortage and having to use masks for several days and stuff on that order. So that just resonated throughout Orbitform, and that really was, those were the words Mike Shirkey was using when we were trying to decide to go ahead and do this. That's proving, to us to be, we're actually creating a separate company called Orbitform Medical to house several other ideas that we have. We can manufacture a air cleaning, an industrial or commercial style air cleaning system that is already in use in hospitals and stuff like that. So it kind of, its genesis was a sincere desire to help, and we're taking it to a new level. And the biggest thing in our purpose is to, our stated Orbitform purpose is to create ever improving results and security for our employees, investors, and our customers. And this whole segue of creating Orbitform Medical is a big way to help do that.
Yeah, it is incredibly, a great, incredible opportunity, but it also, will bring a lot of good as well. So, it's great to be able to kind of check a couple of boxes. And I don't think anybody should be shy about innovation or things that are going well. I mean, we need to hear, this is why we're doing this exact webinar is sharing what is going well, what we are feeling optimistic about. And so, you've got some really, really big thoughts on, what you see our future uh, around reshoring. I can remember standing in your facility a few months back when we were able to like not be social distance from each other, and you and I talking about, and Lisa as well, talking about reshoring. So why don't you share what you're feeling most optimistic about right now?
I will. Prior to doing that, could I just say one thing that an employee said about this whole process that we had? And they sent it and they wanted to stay anonymous, so I'm respecting that. But this is kind of a summation of it. They said, "We are different here at Orbitform. We made the choice to keep our people employed. We work to make ourselves essential." And she said, "We're helping by designing and supplying the Orbitform decontamination chamber." That was unprompted. And it came from somebody that, 8 years ago when they joined us, that, you would have never thought that those words would have come out of somebody's mouth or whatever. But it's just the whole idea that innovation and figuring things out is probably one of the biggest things that's really awesome. I forgot your question.
Yes. So I'm talking about optimism. What are you feeling most optimistic about? And it's hard not to feel optimistic when you get that validation from your employees. I saw that comment come through on a shared email, and I just, it just makes you so love being able to work with a company like yours.
I think well, thank you. I'm most optimistic about the reshoring. And we have created, this is something that came out of the thinking of, what do we do? And we have an awesome level of customers that we supply, very innovative, making good products. And we really, that kind of goes back to in 2010, 2011, when we terminated customers that didn't share our principles. And that actually was like a 40% hit to our revenue to go ahead and do that. So there was some risk, and then there was some courage to go ahead and do that. So now we have, for the most part, our customer base wildly principled, very innovative and stuff like that. So we're getting asked to help in a trusted advisor type manner, how people can bring certain products and processes back to their companies. And when they left, they terminated all the people that were associated with manufacturing and went to China. Now they're coming back, and they need to have, over the last 30 years, a lot of things have changed, a lot of improvements and continuous improvements happen. There's new ways to do things. And so if we can't satiate or satisfy the requirement of what they have, of course, if it's forming, fastening, and riveting and automation, we want to help, obviously. Sure. But even with that, we are scouring our customer base so that we can have a stable of customers in certain processes that we can refer people to, and give them background information on them and how they do business and everything like that, in a true Bob Berg go-giver type manner. Right. And we're finding that to be rather a successful, trusted advisor type position, even if there's nothing in it for us or for Orbitform. And so, but companies are really starting to, innovate and design their processes to sit there and say, hey, do I think another pandemic could happen? Do I think that China could cut off our critical parts coming to our company and that sort of stuff? Those are all start to become affirmatives. And so now there's a true cost to having stuff offshore or out of your control. And so we're helping people come up with the best processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we work with so many manufacturers, and we're having those conversations that, around supply chain, and how are we, we might be fine right now, but what is that going to look like in 6 months when we've really exhausted
Right.
access to certain component parts, and how do we help connect people that can build and get orders with some, onshore contract manufacturers. So really exciting time to be in the maker space right now. Well, I'm going to ask you a more personal question about, leading through something, a crisis like this. I mean, I think we've all probably had our major ups and downs in business, but this is, been a pretty magnanimous time to be a leader. And so how has it changed you, or what has been that experience?
Well, how has it changed me? Well, I think it's more been an affirmation of just how special the Orbitform team is, and how the senior leadership is at Orbitform. And then on top of that, we took a bold move about 2 years ago to actually create what we'll call middle management at Orbitform. And those 14, 15 individuals have just stepped up to the plate. Before, it was just senior leadership and everybody else at Orbitform. And it wasn't, as we were growing, we just didn't have in touch with everybody the way they should be. So we kind of said we got to, step forward and create this level of management, this leadership that understands our values and leads like us. And there were people that said, that technically they could do it, technically and stuff like that. They didn't want to do the soft side of the job. And the soft side is that you love and care for your people that you're responsible for in a true manner, that you care about their careers, you care about their growth, you care about, their lives and their feelings and stuff like that. So we have that team. So I think that's the, I get a little emotional when I think about it, because I feel like we're really extremely blessed. And but the team deserves our absolute best version of ourselves. We have to play to the highest level that we can during these. There's people that are extremely worried and frightened, on almost every basis associated with this virus and stuff like that. And if we're not caring, if we're not loving for our folks, and we're not treating the plant and the business, we have 50 people working remotely and 65 that are still working in the plant and stuff like that. If we're not thinking of that as those are what if those were our 4 daughters that were in that plant working? How would we want to be? And that is what's driven the requirements and recommendations and suggestions that we have in our safe behavior and safe workplace playbook.
Yeah. Well, I want you to talk a little bit about that, but I do want to just also say, I thought it was so cool that your internal team sent some pictures back to the people that were working from home around things that were getting done in the plant, just to kind of keep that culture vibe going, even though you guys were, 50% of your workforce was separated from the other 50%. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. And we've, so as a senior leadership, we have our, we started off when the crisis first started, meeting every day, and we've broken that down to 3 days a week. We had everyday communications going out to everyone, and the feedback was, we love what's being said, and the communication's just not so much of it. So they asked if we could only do it two times a week. But everybody, we have 115 people, and we have everybody has their own computer at Orbitform. It's a technical company. We have to be fast. So we're sharing files and doing all that kind of stuff on a regular basis. So even if you're, you're in machine build and stuff, like, everybody has their computer. And so we can send out an everyone email, and, it's there waiting for you when you come into work. So that was a big investment, and we've supported that investment, and it's paid off in dividends on a regular basis.
Yeah. Well, I do want you to mention some of the key things. What we're finding across a lot of our clients, mostly, in the manufacturing, because most of our clients are still considered essential. This kind of new playbook for business. I don't think anybody is naive enough to think we're going to go back to how we did business prior. So can you talk about a few of the key components of your playbook for that return to work experience?
Okay. Yeah, and we can, we're modifying and updating it because it's a pretty dynamic thing, but we'd be willing to share the tenets of that playbook for anybody that wants that. It goes all the way from, just three basic things. What happens if I'm sick at work? What do I do? What happens if I find out I'm sick at night? What should I do? What happens if I'm in close contact with somebody that's suspected of, having it? So we map out those things. We map out things. We have a chart of how we go through twice a day and clean surfaces. And what that is, and we've asked for a lot of input from everybody at the plant. And there were places that came up that you kind of hit yourself and go, yeah, that's someplace that we should be doing. But just some awesome inputs from that. How we're going to, we've got PPE stuff that's available for folks. We're not forcing people to wear it, but it is accessible. Standard, modes of operation of how, the hygiene side of it and all of that kind of stuff. And then, up to and including, there's some people that are, this was not on our radar, that they see fellow employees that either don't view it as serious or whatever, and they're not adhering to what's been put out there. And what do I do? In that situation. So we've kind of mapped out for people, here's how you should approach that. Here's how you should do that. And, those are just things you don't think of on a normal basis, but, we're trying to answer all the questions ahead of time.
I think that is, we've seen the businesses that are being a bit more proactive really just do well, and when they haven't been as proactive, it's been challenging. So I think it would be really valuable if we could share out the 10 tenets, following this, or if you want to personally share those out. So I think I'm going to be able to ask one more question, and we're going to turn it over to the attendees to be able to ask you some questions. But this is one thing that I've always sort of admired about you, and that we haven't seen this done very well in many organizations, but it is, you've been working on a timeline of your transition out of the organization. And so, can you speak to that a little bit, and how maybe some of the sort of what's going on now has you've learned just in the recent 2 months about, that, thinking about that timetable and where you're at?
Sure. It's, I'm going to retire in, within 3 years. And so I made a decision to have a purpose-driven retirement. And so then you start to sit there and think about it, because, you do have time to reflect during all of this that's going on. So, I want to have, to break it down into simple percentages, I want to have 70% of my time on family and focus in that arena. And then I got that 30%. And that 30% is, we're looking at acquisitions right now, an investment group looking at acquisitions where we could, my role in that process, besides being an investor, would be an executive coach to the main leaders of those businesses, And, you know, we're looking at competency in leadership. We're looking at do they have a servant leadership persona associated with that? And are they the type of people that would love and care for their folks in a competent manner? And then also, would they want to create an environment that is a continuous improvement, full of courage type environment or persona? And you know, I think that that will be that'll be purposeful, because great leadership provides security for the folks that are working at their business. And we at Orbitform, we pride ourselves on that. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest you know, accomplishments is we're a continuous improvement environment, and we love and care for our folks, and we want them to feel secure.
Yeah.
So that's
Awesome.
what I plan on doing, and
Yeah,
we're looking at businesses right now.
Yeah, so you and I both have a similar philosophy about retirement, where we'd still be working. So at least I see a lot of questions coming in, so I'm gonna turn it over to you.
A lot of questions, so which I'm very excited about. So Phil, I'm going to start you off with
Lisa, just pick the easy ones.
Of course. Actually, they're great questions, and almost all of them I could speak for you because I know how passionate you are about several of these. So the first two questions I'm actually going to group together. So we had a few people curious about your UVC DC chamber and a little specifics. They were wondering what the cost was running on those to purchase one, and what does the cycle time look like? So how
yeah.
a mask?
Okay, so it can hold 10 masks per cycle, and we call it the 10 for 10, which is a 10-minute cycle time.
Okay.
And then the cost, you know, we're UV lights, as you could expect, are going through the roof right now. So the cost associated with it is $5,685.
Okay.
And then plus shipping on top of that, because it's a precision piece of equipment. So we've designed some third-party shipping crates or containers that are going to protect it in the shipping. It's a stainless steel, polished stainless steel chamber, which, you know, you wouldn't think about it until you get into it, but it's highly reflective, and so the reflectivity of the inner walls really help to decontaminate the mask also. So as you can see, those the trays go down into it, and they're getting bombarded with light on both sides, UV on both sides.
All right, so we're going to switch off of the UVC DC and then go more into some of the business practices that you mentioned today. So one of the things you mentioned earlier on was when you had to terminate some of your clients, that, you know, it was a 40% decrease in revenue, but very much needed. What really led you to that decision? What were the principles behind it? You know, how do you, you know, what were the results that came off of that situation? Obviously, there was a big risk. So what was the reward portion of it?
Real quick story. So we had companies that were not principled companies. They lived in the world of we win, you lose. And they didn't consider it a victory unless you did lose. And so we finally woke up to that equation. But at the same time, once again, the owner of the business, Mike Shirkey, I mistakenly went ahead and signed up for the Assembly Assembly Magazine trade show held in the Rosemont by O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And then I told Mike Shirkey that we were doing that, and he says, "No, you're not going to do that." And so he says, well, you know, he finally came around, because we'd already paid to do it, so we were going. But he said, if you're going to go, you have to show something new each year. And so in the 5 years preceding the show, we had 2 new products or greatly enhanced products. In the 7 years that we've done the show, because of his edict that something new has to be shown, we've had 35, in excess of 35 new, and some of the products that, for our size of company, have provided millions of dollars of revenue. So it was a pretty big thing. What we did with those customers that were insatiable and that we ended up firing, we were working 24/7 to try to satiate them. And so we took all that energy and we applied it to our new product development cycle. And what that ended up doing was creating revenue streams of standard products that will go on into Orbitform's history far in advance or far in excess of my tenure at Orbitform. And it started because of the major decision to say that we weren't going to take it anymore from these people that were godless. And then we backfilled it with innovating and putting the energy into Orbitform, new products.
I can always hear that story over and over again. I love that story so
Amazing.
much.
So I think going off of that too, as a follow-up question to it, knowing that obviously a lot changed during that period, that you're putting energy elsewhere. You also talked about adding in your new management tier. So how, what did the process look like? How did you identify the right people? Because I know along the way there were some not right people. How did that development process look like? How did you help cultivate those leaders to exemplify Orbitform's values?
We're about 3 years into the EOS traction process. And in the self-examination through the EOS process, we came to understand that we were shortchanging the people in Orbitform by not having that mid-management level. So that's the genesis. That's actually the strategic genesis side of the creation of that. How do we choose or we laid out in pretty clear terms what somewhat of a position paper that was written by me that stated this is what a leader at Orbitform looks like. And everybody that read it, there was one person that said, I don't want to do that. And then the other people said, yes, I can do this. And so even though they might have been, on, the low end of the scale of that, with the intentional career growth, it's been crafted such that it helps them in the arenas where they're a little short.
All right, so next question, we've got 3 more I want to cover today, and we'll see if any more come in. But one of your comments when you were talking about sales was you'd mentioned joining an association as a way to expand your market reach. Could you talk a little bit more about how that worked for Orbitform?
Yeah, Brian Wright, our VP of sales, pestered me for probably a period of time. And then he says, we really got to join this group. It's 80, 90 or more aerospace manufacturers in Michigan. And Michigan turns out to be, within the top 3 or 4 states that manufacture for aerospace. Primarily driven off of our automotive heritage and skills and capabilities. And so, AIAM is the organization. And so what we've been doing is we've been able to make some connections. We're actually, it seems strange, but, there's another organization, a hand tool organization that they're asking us, how can the decontamination chamber be used for hand tools? And so, there's, you kind of just, on faith, you sit there and say, okay, this is a positive, this is the right thing to do. And so you make a decision to go down that path, and then all of a sudden you trip into some of these opportunities.
There we go. We'll take myself off mute there. So second to last question, and I know you already have the answer to this one. So you mentioned the fanatical prospecting. Do you have any other books that you love and you'd be willing to share on your recommended reading list? And
I do, and I'm going to machine gun them, and I'll make sure that, you guys have that for it. But before we do that, I really am just dying to say this one thing. You had a question here, Kathy, in prompting for this process is, who have you leaned on most? And I just want to say there's three major elements. My Catholic Christian faith. I'm going to say my wife, Mary, who helps me out on a tremendous amount of clear thinking time and stuff on that, and very supportive. Our Orbitform senior leadership and our Orbitform team. So those are people I've leaned on. So some great books I've read recently. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Unlocking Greatness by Charlie Harry. Red Sea Rules by Robert Morgan. And, something that's awesome for any leader that they should be doing is a great book, which is based on science, is Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. I love books that take the human side of it, but they back it up with research, and it's just not some one person's opinion.
Right.
And all three of the Atomic Habits, Unlocking Greatness, and Culture Code are all based on psychological research and stuff that's based on facts. I got to mention Jeb Blunt's new book, and it's called Inked. And for anybody that's doing B2B selling, he has put into one document, one book, all of the elements about great negotiations. And I think it's become, just as fanatical prospecting became a Bible at Orbitform for prospecting and outbound work and stuff like that, is that that book has it all in one cover. So, we have these people, the Mike Weinbergs, the Jeb Blunts, the Anthony Iannarino, people that have been helping us from a standpoint of the books that they've written and stuff. But then we got to a level in sales where, on a scale of 1 to 10, we started off at 4, we got to 7, and we wanted to go to 8 or 8.5. And we've enlisted the help of Colleen Francis to take us because I don't think we can get to 9. I don't, that might, maybe 10 years from now, we'll get to 9. But we want to get to 8.5, and she has been with us as a sales coach for Brian Wright and the Orbitform sales team starting in January, and we've made some great strides. It's that idea that we knew that there was something missing, and we didn't have it inside our walls, and we had to get it, outside and we found Colleen at Outbound 2019 held in Atlanta. So anyways.
So as we go to the final question here, Phil, which is, what is one thing you've learned during COVID-19 that you're going to keep? And for those of you on the screen, I'm going to switch over so you can see Phil's contact info in case you did have any questions, but I thought that would be an appropriate question to wrap up today. So one thing you've learned you're going to keep doing at Orbitform.
Well, I'm going to cheat and do 2 things. The first thing is that the creation of, which we would have never have done, the creation of our safe behaviors and safe workplace playbook. That would have never been on our agenda, and now we're doing it. And we're taking people across this country are going from a self-awareness of their hygiene and stuff that's associated with it that probably should have been in place, anyway. So we're putting it into a playbook where we sit there and say, these are the rules of engagement when you're at work, and we want you to share it with your family. The second thing is that I would have never have thought that we would have been a work from home or remote type company. We are going to have some portion of our workforce, of our front office people having the flexibility of working remotely. That'll probably stick, and we're working on, who is that, how much is it, what do we do, all that kind of, all the things that the questions that come out of that. that's associated with it. And why is that so important? Because we never viewed ourselves, we've had chances to get superstars, but they didn't want to move to Jackson, Michigan. I love Jackson anyways, but now with what we've learned in this process, and this is going into some of the good, there are going to be superstars that are going to be in, I don't know, Denver or somewhere like that, and that sort of stuff, that are going to be able to be part of the Orbitform team, because we're going to explore what it means to, because we need, we need high-powered folks, and so that might be open up a whole new channel that we never had before. So those two things.
So great.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you for your questions for those of you that tuned in today. So as you can see on the screen, feel free, Phil has his email up there, so just reference unusual in the subject line. But if you have any follow-up questions for him, you can also connect with him on LinkedIn as well. And we'll make sure Phil's books and his top tips and tricks are included in the follow-up that you'll receive along with the recording of today's session.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
thank
Kathy.
you, Lise.
Thanks,
Yes,
Lisa.
thank you. And so for those of you, if you enjoyed today's content or know someone else that would, please let them know our next Business as Unusual webinar will take place on May 14th. We're going to be featuring Mark Morrell. He's the Chief Curator at getmainelobster.com. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, why would I want to talk to a food manufacturer? But obviously food is very critical during the COVID-19 crisis. But put yourself in the shoes of what would happen if your business today had 10 times more revenue than typical. You had a higher staff, but you're also in a feast to famine mode of not having inventory or having too much inventory. So I think this is universal to anyone across the board. For those of you who have went through acquisitions and trying to cultures, for those of you that are just struggling with a workforce right now of how do you hire employees during a time period like this and onboard them when we are in the midst of a pandemic. Mark has a great story to tell of how they are surviving and thriving. So hope you'll stay tuned. Registration information will be available later on today. So we look forward to having you back on May 14th and hearing from Mark and the great story of Get Maine Lobster.
All right. Thanks so much, Lisa. It's been great. It wouldn't be a Red Caffeine event if there wasn't a little bit of a dog barking in the background. So I love that Duke has, had to get his 2 cents in during this.
Yes. So thank you, Kathy and Phil as well. For those of you that have any other questions, or perhaps this is your first time hearing about Red Caffeine, feel free to connect with us at connect@redcaffeine.com, or you can go follow us on social media. But look forward to seeing you all back on the 14th and talking about food, which is one of my favorite things, as I know it is Kathy's as well.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.